Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight as we continue our journey through Second Corinthians, as we see how Paul deals with the brethren in Corinth after a lot of difficulty. But more than just the brethren in Corinth, there are some who have come in and they have some bad things to say about Paul. They're giving various reasons as to why the Corinthian brethren maybe shouldn't listen to Paul, and Paul's having to address those issues. And we're right in the midst of the last section of this letter, and Paul's getting a little hot and he's getting a little aggressive as he deals with these teachers that have come in, these false apostles. And so we will look a little bit more at this evening. We have Ken Chapman with us from Orlando, Florida. How are you doing tonight?
So far, so good, Jonathan. Looking forward to the study.
Well, we have a good chunk of text to look at, so why don't we just go ahead and dig in? And because of space limits and whatnot, I've divided the section into three various sections. And so, Ken, if you will, read the first section for us, chapter 11, verses 16 through 21.
I repeat, let no one think me foolish, but even if you do, accept me as a fool, so that I too may boast a little. What I am saying with this boastful confidence, I say not as the Lord would, but as a fool. Since many boast according to the flesh, I too will boast. For you gladly bear with fools, being wise yourselves. But you bear it if someone makes slaves of you, or devours you, or takes advantage of you, or puts on airs, or strikes you in the face. To my shame, I must say, we were too weak for that. But whatever anyone else dares to boast of, I'm speaking as a fool, I also dare to boast of that.
As we get into this section, Paul's he feels like he has to stack himself up against these false apostles. He says it's foolish to compare yourself to one another. And he never gets away from that idea of foolishness here. We see it at the very beginning. I repeat, let no one think me foolish. This goes all the way back to verse 1 of this chapter, where he says, I wish you would bear with me a little foolishness. Do bear with me. He's trying to make a point. He's got a very important point to make, and he's going to do it in this kind of roundabout way here. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't like doing this. But he doesn't ever want them to forget that he's kind of playing a part here. And he reemphasizes over and over and over, I'm just being foolish. I'm being a fool. I'm just talking here, thinking out loud here, just to get them to understand that this is not his normal way of doing things. And so please don't think me foolish, but even if you do, accept me as a fool, that I may boast a little. And Ken, this is a sick burn right here, because what he says is only those who would boast are foolish. And so really a throw of some mud here at the false apostles.
Yeah, it seems apparent Paul is doing something here. The repetition of this idea of boasting and of fools. And I ask you, there's two possibilities. Is Paul kind of slyly answering an accusation? Had some been calling him a fool? And so he just says, okay, I'm a fool, bear with me as a fool. You want to call me a fool? I'll wear that badge. Or is he addressing his opponents, these false teachers? Are they the ones who are fools? Or is it all of the above? What's your thought?
I would say that it is all of the above. I would imagine that they've thrown that accusation at him, and his he doesn't want to say no, you first, like a child might, but he said, yeah, okay, whatever, I'm a fool, because it's fools who boast, and you're right, he does throw this back at them there, and I think he's going to say here that. I'm not exactly following the Lord's example here. Jesus wouldn't have done this. That doesn't make it wrong. However, maybe we could pull from Proverbs 26 at verse 5, which says, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise. in his own eyes. You'll remember the previous verse says, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be, lumped in with him. And the idea there is you have to use wisdom to determine best how to handle these situations. And Paul says, I think now is the time to answer them according to this foolishness here. Since many boast according to the flesh, I will as well. For you gladly bear with fools, being wise yourselves. And this phrase is just dripping with sarcasm. You're so wise, you must deal with fools all the time. And the Corinthians were a proud people. They thought of themselves as very wise, thought of themselves as very tolerant, very educated. And we know people like that in our society today. Boy, you're so wise. What is it Job says to his buddies? When you die, wisdom will die with you. And Paul's making kind of the same stinging accusation here. And then I think he does level an accusation against these false apostles, these people who have come in. He says, for you bear it if someone makes slaves of you or devours you or takes advantage of you or puts on airs or even slaps you in the face. And I think why this annoys Paul is because they put up with all this, and Paul just comes in with the gospel and the simple message of Jesus Christ. And they're like, nah, I don't think so. But these people come in and they're taking their money, they're making them slaves, they're probably lying about some of their achievements, and maybe even resorting to physical abuse. And Paul says, you put up with all that, but you don't put up with me. And this is what's foolishness. But hold on, I'm going to play the part of a fool here as he goes through this. Ken, do you think that he's just maybe stacking phrases here, or do you think that this is a list of the things that are happening with these false apostles?
Maybe a little both again. I think certainly it's something that these opponents of Paul in Corinth were doing. Now, maybe metaphorically, I don't know that they were really slapping the Corinthians around literally, but in some way they were certainly offensive and offending these Corinthians, and they had tolerated it. So yeah, I would say that it's probably what was going on.
Yeah. And just the idea that you put up with all of this, but you can't endure my teaching, which we've already seen a couple of chapters earlier, was for building up. It's not for tearing down, it's for building up.
Do you see here, maybe if this list is truly what some of these opponents and false teachers were doing, do we see maybe a little hint of this possibly being the Judaizing teachers? In that first phrase, they make slaves of you,
right.
Of binding you to the old law, enslaving you to that old system. That's very reminiscent of some language Paul uses in other places to talk about the Judaizing teachers.
Yeah. That over in Galatians, right? Could be, absolutely could be. And then we get another little statement here. To my shame, I must say, we were too weak for all that. We didn't have the strength to enslave you and slap you around and tell you what to do and all that kind of a thing. And so, if you're calling me weak, well, then I guess I'm weak here. But again, I'm speaking as a fool. Let's remember, this is an exercise that we're going through, Paul says. And I'm speaking the part of a fool. Let's get through the exercise. And, sometimes as preachers, we might be making an argument or going through something. We say, hold on, let me get to the end here. Let me get through what we're talking about, and then we can kind of wrap it up. Well, that's what Paul keeps saying here. Hold on, let me get through what I'm trying to do here, the point I'm trying to make here. And then Paul is going to compare himself, maybe some of the things that these false prophets or false apostles are boasting of. He's going to say, well, I'm kind of in the same boat. I've done the same things. I am of the same ilk here. Are they Hebrews? Well, so am I. Are they Israelites? Well, so am I. Could be a distinction here between Hebrews and Israelites. Maybe some Palestinian Jews at this time. tried to brag about that as opposed to the diaspora Jews. Well, at least we're in the homeland. Could be some idea there. Are they offspring of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am a better one. So now we take it up a level. And it appears to me that what Paul is going to do is build off of this last idea, this servant of Christ concept, and how he is actually a better one. But don't forget, I'm talking like a madman. I'm talking outside of my mind. I'm crazy here. So we actually kind of up the language here from fool to madman. This is getting silly, is kind of what he's saying here. And he summarizes these labors, the service that he is doing for the Lord with far greater labors, far more imprisonment, far more beatings, often near death. Now, what we're going to see here is that all of these things, these false apostles would have used against Paul. And now Paul's going to boast of them. And so he's really kind of throwing this back in their face here. He's answering them according to their folly here. So we have this summary with far greater labors, imprisonments, beatings, and often near death. Then he's going to get very specific about some things. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews 40 lashes less one. Ken, I guess I forgot to let you read this section, didn't I?
Yeah, that's okay. I've had my feelings hurt before.
Okay,
But,
well, I'm just so excited. I just kept going. I was just rolling right on through.
But to your point here, that's interesting. Yeah, in this boast, he's not boasting, as you were talking about before we started recording. He's not boasting about all of his missionary journeys, the churches he's established, the peoples he's baptized. He's boasting about the bad things that have happened to him,
right?
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, forgive me for passing you over, and hopefully you won't feel like Paul and have to boast against me here.
I like you slapping me in the face like these opponents.
You were too weak to do that. This receiving of the 40 lashes, the law in Deuteronomy, you won't beat them more than 40 times, lest you dehumanize them, basically. So the typical practice was you would only do it 39 times to not go over. I'm going to feel less than human probably about after the first or second lash here. I don't know what level of pain we're looking at here. But it's happened 5 times. Any kind of pain, I don't want it to happen 39 times. Ken, my siblings and I, we had talked to my dad one time. This is after we're all grown up, and we asked him about our spankings growing up, because it felt like they went on forever. They felt like they 40 plus 20. And Dad said, no, he had a number in his mind. He did not go past that. I can't remember what it was. For my kids, I don't go more than 3. And if it's going to take something, maybe I get a utensil to get it done. But so we have that going on here. And there's that number. He's endured this 5 times. That level of purposefully inflicted pain, us today do not understand. We might have pain. We might have getting old pain. We might have getting injured pain. But this purposeful punishment pain is something that we almost don't even understand.
We tie this with what he will tell the Galatian brethren, where he says, I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. Right. And this is where he got those marks. Literally, right. Can you imagine, not to get too graphic here, but can you imagine Paul taking his shirt off, right, and showing you his back? Yeah. If you, I don't know, do the math, 39 times 5. We don't know how many times. I mean, he was beaten 3 times with rods, but was that just like one hit each time? Probably not. Yeah. And then the stonings, you can imagine his body just be covered with scars.
So this is 200 minus, so 195 lashes he's received at the hands of the Jews. Plus, which you just referenced. 3 times I was beaten with rods. In our daily Bible, no, in our sermon, and our sermon for Sunday, and we're going through Acts, or I'm going through Acts this year. We're in Acts chapter 16 this coming Sunday, and we see he and Silas being beaten with rods. That's just one of these times. I don't guess we're told the instance of the other 2 times. Once I was stoned. We see this in Lystra, in Acts chapters 13 and 14. We're much more familiar, Ken, with the Roman method of execution, crucifixion, because of our studies in the Gospels. We're not maybe as familiar with stoning. And from what I've read, stoning was as easy and quick or as slow and painful as the crowd wanted it to be. They could make you suffer, or they could, I guess, clock you over the head with a big one and get it over with real quick.
And don't think where my mind would maybe automatically want to go is the idea of throwing like a gravel you might pull out of a driveway.
Right.
We used to do that as boys. We'd throw rocks at each other, and that they would really sting and leave a mark if they hit you. But we're not talking about that type of stones when we're talking about being stoned.
Yeah, y'all didn't have much to do in Coleman County growing up, did you?
No, that was the pastime.
And then he says, 3 times I was shipwrecked, a night and a day I was adrift in the sea. Ken, what's interesting about this one is where we are in Paul's lifetime. This doesn't include the shipwreck that we know so much about at the end of Acts. We haven't even gotten there yet. So he, at the very least, experiences 4 shipwrecks. If you look at the timeline here, just guesstimating here, when Paul writes 1st and 2nd Corinthians, we're probably about halfway through his ministry. This is not what I think you used the term exhaustive before we started recording. This is only halfway through his ministry. He's endured all this. You could likely double it, not to mention the execution that he's going to face of being beheaded at a later time. And so he goes through these specific things. We could talk a lot more about them. I'm just going to go through this next section, which is kind of a summary on frequent journeys and dangers from river, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles. He wasn't safe anywhere. Dangers in cities, dangers in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brethren. In toil and hardship, he was constantly working through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, and cold and exposure. That's enough for anybody to quit and go home. And he says, I've been going through all this.
Yeah, not to make light of it, but every time I read that part that you have highlighted in red there, it almost, again, this not I say not to make light of it. I really am making light of it, I guess, but it sounds almost like a Dr. Seuss line, dangers in the city,
plane, not on a train.
yeah. But yeah, to think, as you said, if this is somewhere about halfway in his ministry, it's not an it's an exhausting list, but not an exhaustive list, that they would have been so much more. And that's summed up already so much more, because some of this stuff he's just generalizing. He's not talking, he talks specifically about some events, but there's more. Imagine what a truly exhaustive list of Paul's travails would have looked like.
Yeah. Can you imagine, they said that Paul was nothing, in person. Can you imagine Paul walking into town, probably hunched over from all these beatings, from the stonings? The poor guy's, he needed a chiropractor, I'm sure. But I didn't think Dr. Seuss. I thought you were going to go with the old, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? I thought that's where you were going with that one, because you look at this. I mean, Ken, we don't like it when people say something mean to us, and look at what Paul is enduring, and he's not done. And apart from other things, there's the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. So not only is Paul going through these physical things, but while he's going through these physical things, he's worried about the Corinthian brethren and whether or not they're really getting this message of the gospel. And now he's So now he's going through these physical things. He's worried that they're not really getting the message. And furthermore, they don't even like him that much. Uh, you know, let's just go home here.
Oh, Paul would make a real good recruiter for future preachers, wouldn't he?
Right. Yeah.
Here's what you want to sign up for.
Right.
And this is what, but to that point, to maybe be serious here, and to recognize that there may not be these, or there are not these physical travails for preachers like you and I today, but there are sacrifices, there are hardships with this, but Paul accepted in all of this. He didn't just fold up his tent, pardon the pun, and quit preaching and quit being an apostle. He endured these things, and if there's any preachers out there listening, I would encourage you to do that. Yes, there are going to be hardships. There are going to be blessings, but there's going to be hardships with this. There's going to be sometimes isolation and difficulty and anxiety for the church, but endure that for the gospel's sake. Don't give up.
Absolutely. Ken, this last phrase, I think it goes with this reference to the churches. It's almost like and then this, and he kind of gives some examples about the anxiety. Someone in this congregation is weak, and it affects Paul. They're weak, and I feel the weakness. They fall, and I feel the effects of that, and I try and help with that. I'm upset by that, and he's right there with them. Paul is never in some lofty ivory tower away from the average, Christian in the pew there. He is right there with them and is concerned for them, each and individual one. And this is weighing on him.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is at least a part of the daily pressure and the anxiety for the churches. But notice the difference in those two rhetorical questions. Who is weak? That's you, Corinthians, potentially. If you're weak, then that makes me weak. That breaks my heart, we would say. It just puts me in a state of despondency or depression. But then the next one, who is made to fall, and I'm not indignant. And so here the indignation is addressed not at those who had fallen, but those who had made them to fall.
Right.
And so my heart is broken for what you're going through spiritually, and I am indignant toward these false teachers who were making it so. And so I think you need to see the contrast in those two questions.
I think so. And we see a good example of that. Let's do the last one first. Remember, Jesus said, whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble. Jesus didn't have a very positive view towards those who would lead to sin. But then you use the term despondency. Remember when Paul got to, I just went blank, Troas, he was crushed. He wanted so badly to hear about how they were doing, and Titus wasn't there, and he needed to hear from them because he knew they were struggling. He knew there was a weakness there, and he was crushed and had to keep walking until he found Titus and could get the news that he really wanted to get. All right, Ken, read this passage for us. I don't want to forget this time.
Well, thank you very much. We're reading chapter 11, verse 30, actually going into chapter 12, verse 1. If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus, he who is blessed forever, knows that I am not lying. At Damascus, the governor under King Aretas was guarding the city of Damascus in order to seize me. But I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall and escaped his hands. I must go on boasting. Though there is nothing to be gained by it, I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord.
So that leads us into Paul's vision in chapter 12. Ken, you'll lead us through a discussion of that next time. Good luck with that. But I included that here because I think it helps us get the swing into the next chapter. Not the greatest chapter break ever, but there again, I'm just being a fool here. Let's not take what I'm saying, as me really trying to compare myself. But he says, if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. What do you think these false apostles were boasting about? They weren't boasting about imprisonments and these kinds of a thing. And yet Paul says, look at all this stuff I've been doing. And they say, yeah, that's kind of embarrassing. And he goes, well, it's what I've been doing. It's what I've been working on. That's how God has been using me here.
And then right after his discussion of the visions and revelations, what does he talk about? His thorn in the flesh.
Right, right.
And so he's going to go from these maybe external weaknesses upon his body to what we might call an internal weakness of his body.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I think it's sandwiched in there.
And there's so many things that Paul could say here. If we were really making a list of accomplishments, there's so many things Paul could say, and yet he boasts in these sufferings, and he's not going to concern himself with those things. And I will boast of the things that show my weakness. Ken, what's this next phrase? Is it just a pause to say, and I'm not exaggerating anything here, maybe a little bit of an accusation against these false apostles who are coming in claiming some things, or is this the idea of that he is just going to boast in these weaknesses?
Yeah, maybe again, not been copping out all this whole study, but maybe a little bit of both. I think he's just, in some sense, this is an oath that he's taking. God knows that I'm not lying, that I'm telling you the truth in all of these things.
Right. And then we get, let's keep going, he says. And let's get a little bit of background here. We read about this story over in Acts chapter 9, is where we have this story. And here's how this works in my mind. I can see these false apostles talking to the Corinthians. Well, when things got difficult in Damascus, Paul tucked his tail and ran, right? They had to shamefully let him out through a window, and he fled in the middle of the night. What do you think he's going to do when things get difficult here? And Paul says, okay, let's put that on my list too. That in Damascus, the governor under King Aretas, king of the Nabateans, uses his influence in Damascus, was guarding the city in order to seize me. And so, yeah, they had to let me down basically in a wicker basket to get me out of there. Yeah, I'll boast of that too. And just one more thing to add to this list here. And I don't want to get too far ahead as he talks about the thorn in the flesh, but we see some of that already working here, that's when God's glory and power is most clearly seen, is when we are completely and utterly weak and seemingly useless, that God can accomplish great things. Ken, this past week I preached on Gideon, and Gideon was terrified. And yet, what do you read over in Hebrews 11 after verse 32, where he's mentioned like these people put foreign armies to flight. They became strong out of weakness. And we see what God does, and we give glory to God. And again, I don't want to get too much ahead of where we're going, but that is where we're going. Paul is building up to that argument, this strength and weakness idea.
And it's such a disarming technique that Paul is using here. I mean, use this illustration. If you knew I was on a diet and you drove by and saw me at Dairy Queen, and then the next time we see each other, you're ready, you're going to pounce. I saw you at Dairy Queen, you were cheating on your diet. And if before, and you're geared up to just give it to me with both barrels. And before you do that, you say, Jonathan, man, I was at Dairy Queen today. I shouldn't have been, and you're just deflated because that's you were going to use that against me. And so these opponents are calling Paul weak. Remember, he's weak in the flesh, at least when he's in person. And so Paul just completely disarms them of that argument. I'm weak. Here's how I'm weak. Here's why I'm weak. And it is just this completely, I think, just disarms these opponents of Paul.
Yeah, what's really annoying is when somebody invites you over for dessert and they put homemade fresh pecan pie down in front of you and a scoop of ice cream, and your youngest son looks up at you and goes, "Thought you were on a diet." I about smacked him through the wall, Ken. He says, I must go on boasting, though there is nothing to be gained by it. Again, just another kind of reference to this foolishness here. Well, I'm done with this list. Let's go on to the visions and revelations. And that's where we get into chapter 12, as Paul is showing that this type of lording it over them is not what it's about. This is not the right way to go about things. Look at what I'm doing, how foolish this is. Well, we will continue in that thread and that theme into chapter 12 next Monday night at 6:30 as Ken leads us in that discussion. So we will look forward to that. And remember, whatever Paul did at this time, he was completely subjecting himself to the Lord. And whether he looked strong, whether he looked weak, it didn't matter. What mattered that was that God was glorified. And so in the beatings and the imprisonments and the suffering, he was just happy to say that he bore in his body the marks of the Lord. And that was his concern, that he could share in the labor with the Lord himself. So we hope you will do that same this week, share in the labor with the Lord and give him everything you have.